Hi everyone, in this video we're going to be setting up a simple rig to allow us to easily pose the player model. So the first thing I'd like to do is just scale the character down to a more human size. I usually consider the default cube to be 2 meters high, so I'm quickly going to press Shift-C to make sure the 3D cursor is centered, press Tab to go into object mode, and then Shift-A to add in a cube as a scale reference. I can then scale the character down so that it's just a little bit under 2 meters, and then I'll delete the cube and move the character up on the Z-axis so that his feet are just resting on the red line of the X-axis, which is sort of the ground plane. Then, with the character selected in object mode, I'll press Ctrl-A and apply firstly his location, which is just going to center the origin in the scene, and then Ctrl-A to apply his scale as well. Now, we no longer need the reference images, of course, so I'll press N to quickly bring up the Properties panel and just disable background images, and then press N to close that once again. Now, to start creating the actual rig, let's make sure we're still in object mode, and then press Shift-A and add in a single bone armature. I'll then press Tab to go into edit mode on the armature, and select the bone and press G and Z to move this up on the Z-axis, so that the head of the bone sits at the base of the pelvis. Now, this is a little bit hard to see in wireframe mode, but if I press Z and go into solid shading mode, it's not much better. So I'll go over here to this little person icon, which is the armature settings, and I will turn on X-ray in the display options so that we can properly see the bone. And then I'm going to right-click to grab the tail of the bone here, and press G and once again Z to move this down on the Z-axis just to somewhere around where the belly button would be. And then I'm going to extrude this out with E, always constraining to the Z-axis so that it remains perfectly in the center. And I'll move this up to the start of the chest, and then I'll extrude that once more on the Z-axis to the base of the neck, once again on the Z-axis to the top of the neck, and one final time to the top of the head. And let's look at this from side view. Mostly seems about right. I'll just move this in a little bit and shift that over there. Just something like that. I'm then going to switch over to front view and select the neck bone and press Shift-D and drag that out to duplicate it. And I'll grab the tail and bring that over to the start of the arm. So this is just forming the shoulder bone, and you can see that there's this black dotted line connecting it to the tip of the chest bone, and this just means that it is parented to the chest bone, and that's because we copied it from the neck bone, which is also parented to the chest bone. Let's just look at this from side view. It seems to be lined up about right, so we can then select the tip and just E to extrude it down to the elbow, and I'll extrude that once more to the base of the hand, extrude it once for the hand bone, once for the first finger bone, and once again for the lower half of the fingers. Let's go to the front and start adjusting this from here. Okay. So these two bones here will handle all of the fingers, since it is a mitten hand, but we do need a bone for the thumb. So I'm going to duplicate that from the first finger bone, so that it's also parented to the hand bone. And let me just move this up to the base of the thumb, and this to the tip of the thumb. Let me see that from side view. Let's get this lined up correctly. All right, and I actually want 2 bones along the thumb so that the thumb can bend. So I can select the bone and press W to bring up the specials menu and just subdivide the bone like so. And then I'll just drag that out to get the bend of the thumb. All right, so that is the arm done. We then need to worry about the legs. I want the legs to be parented to this hip bone. So I'm going to select the spine bone, which is parented to the hip bone, and duplicate that with Shift-D and bring that to the start of the leg. And then I'll grab the tail and drag that down to around the knee and extrude that out to the base of the foot. I'll quickly go into side view and just adjust this from there. And then I'll extrude the lower leg bone to form this foot bone, which will rest at the start of the toes. And I'll extrude that out once more to the tip of the toes. And from front view, let me come and adjust this here as well, just so that it all lines up. Now, I'd like to fix the weird twisting that's going on with some of these bones, like this one and this one over here. So I'm going to press A to just select all of the bones in edit mode, and then I'll press Control N. Do make sure that you're in edit mode, not object mode, otherwise it will start up a new file. And this will bring up recalculate roll. And from front view, I'll just ask it to recalculate based on the view axis. And you can see these will all now line up with the front view. So this is the main part of our rig done. So I'm quickly going to press Control Tab to go into pose mode, or you can just select that from the menu over here. And I just want to make sure that all of the parenting is set up correctly. So if I grab the chest bone over here and rotate that, you should see the neck, head, and the arm rotating along with that. If I rotate the hand bone, you should see the fingers and the thumb rotating with that. And if I move or rotate the hip bone, you should see everything goes along with that. So if you made a mistake somewhere and, say, duplicated the wrong bone and something ended up parented to something that it shouldn't be parented to, I quickly want to show you how to fix that. So going into edit mode on the bones, you can clear a parent by selecting the bone and pressing Alt-P and clear parent, like so. And you can see the black dotted line has disappeared. And then to parent it to the correct bone, you start out with this bone selected, then shift select the bone you want to parent it to, Control P, and then you can parent it either connected or keep offset. So for this bone, we want to keep offset, but bones like the spine bone here, which is physically connected to the hip bone, would be parented connected. Okay, so the rig isn't completely finished yet. I still want to add in the IK system to make the legs a little easier to control, but I quickly want to go through and name all of the bones that we have so far. So going into this little bone icon here, I'll name this the hips bone. Then this will be the spine, followed by the chest, then the neck, and lastly the head. And then for these bones on the character's left, I'm going to follow a specific naming convention, which is to first write the name of the bone, so in this case shoulder, and then dot capital L for the left. Alright, so I'll follow that for all of these bones. This is upper arm dot capital L, lower arm dot capital L, and so on. And I know this is a little bit tedious, but it is fairly important. The reason it's important, apart from just being nice and tidy, is that when we mirror the bones from the left side over to the right side a little bit later on, and we ask it to flip the names, it will recognize the convention, and it will be able to name all of the bones on the right with .r instead of .l, and then it will know which bone on the left of the character corresponds to which bone on the right. And that means that if we set up a pose on one half of the character, we can ask it to then copy that pose over to the other side of the character, and this is going to save us a lot of time when animating. Okay, so I've just finished naming the last bone, toes.l. Let's now go ahead and create the IK bones. So I'm going to press 3 to go into side view, and I'll select the tail of the lower leg bone and just press E to extrude this out. I'll select the bone and press Alt-P to clear the parent, so it's now a free bone. And then, somewhat mysteriously, if you've never seen this before, I'm going to left-click somewhere out here, level with the knee, and press Shift-A to add in a new bone, and just have this pointing forwards. And with this bone selected, I'm going to come over here and turn off deform in the bone properties, and that's just because this is a control bone, which means that it doesn't directly affect any of the vertices in the mesh, but rather it helps to control the other bones. Now this is going to be called the pull target .l, and this bone that we created down here, it's also not a deformation bone, so I'll toggle that off, and this is going to be leg IK, standing for inverse kinematics, .L. And quickly from the front view, let me just make sure that this pull target bone is positioned in front of the left knee, like so. And then coming into side view again, I'm going to go into pose mode, and I will first select this IK bone, and then shift right click to select the lower leg bone. And note that the order of this is important. First the IK bone, then the lower leg bone, and then I'll press Shift Control C, and this is going to bring up the Add Constraint with Targets menu, and I can choose Inverse Kinematics, and the lower leg bone should turn yellow. We can then head over to this panel here with the icon of the bone and the chain link, which is the Bone Constraints panel, and we can see our inverse kinematics constraint. Now, in past rigging videos of mine, people have had some difficulties with that shortcut, so I'm going to remove the bone constraint and quickly show you how to do this manually. So you'd select the lower leg bone, and in the same bone constraints panel, we can add inverse kinematics, and then from the target field here, we can choose armature, and the target bone will be the IK bone. So we can search for that, leg IK, and we're now at the same place as if we used the shortcut. For the pull target, we then choose armature once again, and the bone is of course our pull target. Alright, immediately things have gone a bit crazy, but there are two things that we need to adjust. The first is chain length, which we need to change to 2, because the number of bones in the leg is 2. And then you can see that the leg has become twisted. Well, it may not have in your case, depending on the bone's rotation, but in my case it certainly has. So I can change the pull angle, and this looks to be 90 degrees off. So I'll just enter 90 degrees over there. What we should now see, if I just go into side view, is that I can have some sort of control over the leg just by moving this IK bone. Now, in my case, things aren't looking so good. I want the leg to stick out this way in a sort of natural fashion, but instead it's determined to stick out weirdly to the left. Now, part of the pull target's job is to help with this. We can use this to orient the bone a little bit, but this is far too severe to fix with just changing the position of the pull target. So I'm going to go into edit mode, and I'm quickly going to press H to hide the pull target because it's a bit in my way. And from front view, I'm going to grab this knee joint. Let me just zoom in here so I can get some finer control. And by changing the position of the knee joint slightly, we can greatly affect how the leg bends. So if I just move this over this way a little bit, and then hop into pose mode, we can see it's still quite wrong. But if I were to drag it over this way, you can see it's now bent in the other direction. So I just want to make micro adjustments here. And I can do that by holding down Shift and dragging until it seems to be in roughly the right position. And I can also bend it a little bit forwards from the side view. And now we have a much nicer control over the leg. So you can see it starts to bend once it gets past the pull target, but by moving the pull target around, you can point the knee. So at this point, the IK system is working pretty well, I'd say. So I'm going to go back into edit mode, and I want to unhide that pull target bone. So Alt-H, and it will show up. Alright, going back into pose mode, I want to make it so that I can rotate the foot just by rotating the IK bone. Now, currently, the rotation of the foot depends on the lower leg bone. So you can see that if I move this, it sort of rotates along with the lower leg bone. Now I want to stop it from doing that. So I'm going to select the foot bone and just go into the bone settings here. And under the relations settings, for the parent, I'll say turn off inherit rotation. So now as I move this around, you can see that the bone remains perfectly level. I'm then going to add in a bone constraint on the foot bone in much the same way that we did the IK constraint. I'll first select the IK bone, shift select the foot bone, and then shift Control C and add in a copy rotation constraint. Alright, the foot should turn green. So let me select that and then go over into the bone constraints. And I want to change the space to local with parent. Alright, now let's see what happens as I rotate the IK bone. It seems to be rotating correctly along the x-axis. If it were rotating in the opposite direction, which it may do in your case, you can invert on the x-axis, and then it will rotate in the other way. Let me try rotating this on the z-axis. It's also working okay there. Once again, you can use the invert options to make sure that things work as expected. The bones are now all set up how I want them, so I just need to now copy the bones over from the left side onto the right side. Let me first select everything though here in pose mode and just press Alt-R and Alt-G to clear the rotation and location of the bones. I'll then press Tab to go into edit mode, and I want to select all of the bones on the left-hand side, the character's left-hand side, that is. So I'll go into wireframe mode, and I'll use my box select tool to just select all of these down here. Now for this step I need the 3D cursor to be properly centered, so I'm going to press Shift-C to make sure that that's the case, and then I'm going to press Shift-D to duplicate all of these bones, and with them duplicated I'm going to right-click, which just cancels their movement, but they're still duplicated here. Now note that their current pivot point is over here, so if I were to rotate or scale these, they'd all move towards that point. Now I want to change that point to be at the 3D cursor, and we can do this by pressing the period key, or the full stop key, whatever you want to call it. So now if I scale this, it all scales towards there. If I lock the scale to the x-axis, however, by pressing X, it will now scale over onto the other side, like so. Now I want to scale it exactly -1 along the x-axis, so I can just type that in, -1, and then press Enter. With all of these bones still selected, I'm going to go into the armature menu here, and I'm going to choose the Flip Names option. Now when I press that, you'll be able to see that going onto these bones now, into the bone settings, the name has changed to shoulder.r. So you can see it recognized our convention of naming the ones on the left side .l, and it's converted that to .r on the other side. Okay, now one thing that I'm noticing is that some of the bones that we copied over onto the other side here have got slightly different roll angles. For example, this shoulder bone here is rolled slightly differently to the corresponding shoulder bone on the other side, and another good example is this lower arm bone here compared to this one. And if you're wondering why this is a problem, well, recall how earlier I was talking about how useful it is to be able to copy a pose from one side of the character and paste it over onto the other side of the character. Well, if the bone rolls are different, then that's not going to be very accurate. For example, if I just switch into pose mode and start setting up a pose, I'm still rotating around the 3D cursor though, so let me just press comma to switch back to the normal pivot mode. And I'll set up just a very simple pose here with this one arm, and I'll select all of these bones, Control C, and then Shift Control V to paste the flipped pose, in other words to paste it over to the other side, and alternatively the buttons for that are copy and paste flipped down here. and we can see that the pose on the right side of the character is a little bit different, and this slight discrepancy is purely due to the bone roll. So I'm going to select all the bones, Alt-R, to reset the rotation, and I'm going to go into edit mode here, and with all of the bones selected, I'm once again going to press Ctrl-N to bring up the recalculate roll menu, and I'm just going to align these along the view axis. And now you can see that the roll of the bones on this side of the character is consistent with the roll of the bones on the other side. So if you were to repeat that pose flipping experiment, you should see that it works correctly now. Alright, so the rig is now done. We just need to make it so that when we pose the bones, the mesh actually follows along with it. So to do this, let's go into object mode so that I can select the character model, and then do shift right click on the bones to select those, and press Ctrl P to bring up the parent options. And as long as you first selected the character and then the bones, you should have all of these armature deform options, and we're going to choose parent with automatic weights. Now if I select the bones, press Ctrl Tab to go into pose mode, the mesh should actually follow along as I move the bones around. So that's exciting. We can see that with the automatic weighting, some areas have worked better than others. So if I try lift this shoulder up, you can see that a little bit too much of the side of the body is maybe being lifted up with it. And these are the sorts of things that we can tweak with weight painting. And that's what we're going to be looking into in the next episode. So until then, cheers.